Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to GST's YQMA episode 70. My name is Ryan Miller and today I'm going to talk about healthy fat loss. Now with fat loss, your nutritional approach has to be in check. If your nutritional approach does not move you towards fat loss, it's really tough to outwork a poor nutritional approach. And the nutritional approach that provides a person with fat loss is known as a calorie deficit. And so this video is all about making sure that you follow a very important rule surrounding the concept of the calorie deficit. Now, a deficit means that you are below a certain level of calories, and that certain level of calories is how many calories you burn in one day of living your life. So you have your basal metabolic rate, and that's the amount of calories that you burn no matter what, not accounting for added activity, just those calories that provide you with processes that are necessary for you to stay alive each day. And then you have your added activity level. Now your added activity during the day, that includes the work you do at your job, the work you do at the gym, and anything in between. So when it comes down to it, you have your basal metabolic rate plus your added activity, and that totals up to a term known as total daily energy expenditure. Obviously it's called TDEE for short. Now you have to eat under your total daily energy expenditure in calories per day if you want your body to shed fat. The problem is that people tend to move to the extreme with nutrition approaches, and what this does is it causes them to go with a number that is very much below their TDEE, and that results in a large calorie deficit. The problem with this is that a large calorie deficit has negative side effects that actually hurt fat loss in the end, and it really provides the person using that large deficit with a really miserable, poor fat loss phase experience. And what I'm here to do today is just to tell you that yes, you need a calorie deficit, but your calorie deficit doesn't have to be this huge drop in calories, because you can be in a 1,000 calorie deficit, you can be in a 500 calorie deficit, you can be in a 200 or 100 calorie deficit, and you're still going to be losing fat in each one of those deficits, but there's different side effects of the large calorie deficit versus the small calorie deficit. So let's go over some of those side effects. If your calorie deficit is large, what you're going to see is you're going to see a drop in general quality of life, and that is because you're taking a lot of energy away from your body, which is a system, away from your system every single day, and that's gonna result in you feeling non-energetic. You're taking so much energy away every day, and so it's no surprise, it's common sense that you are going to be going through every day of that fat loss phase with a low energy level. This isn't fun. It doesn't make your fat loss phase enjoyable, and it's a huge negative side effect associated with dieting with too large of a calorie deficit. Now, if you're thinking about it, that lack of energy is going to carry over to your actual training. And when you're in a calorie deficit, it's important that you still try to train for muscle growth. What that does is it doesn't usually result in actual growth, but it does result in increased muscle retention. So you can eliminate the chance of losing a large amount of muscle during a long-term fat loss phase by still training for growth. But if you're taking away so much energy per day from your body, what that does is it really decreases your ability to do work in the gym. And so it makes your previous levels of training volume, the previous amount of weight that you can use, reps that you can complete, it takes that training volume and it drops it significantly. Now all this does is it results in muscle loss over time. And so with lower energy comes feelings of misery, and also a decrease in training performance. And now that's the second large negative side effect of dieting with too big of a calorie deficit. Your training, it goes down the tubes, and that's not, mentally that's not fun, and physically it's going to result in muscle loss. Now, the third main negative side effect that I want to talk about, and this is also caused by that large calorie deficit. It's a calorie deficit that's too big. It's unnecessarily big. And it's kind of a hidden side effect, but when you're in that large calorie deficit day after day, your levels of hunger increase a lot. So you're going through your days hungry. You might finish a meal and still feel hungry even when you're taking those last bites, but you know that you still have hours to go before your next meal, and it's never a good feeling when you finish a meal that's supposed to be the time that you get satisfied and you're still hungry right after that meal, or that hunger never even goes away. This commonly happens with people that are under eating because their meals are just so small. They just never allow themselves the chance to feel satisfied. And what happens is their rate of success with their fat loss phase actually drops because eventually they cave, and what they tend to do is they tend to binge out. They tend to eat a lot of food, and so they ruin their chance at being in a calorie deficit for that day. Now, this happens more than people like to admit, and more than a lot of people know, because what they'll do is they can even subconsciously add more food to a meal, sneak little things here and there, and they might not even know that they're doing it, just because they're in such a severe calorie deficit that their brain is just, it's trying to increase their calorie intake subconsciously. And whether they know that they're doing it or not, a lot of times they're not tracking that behavior. And so they're eating more than they think they are. They're eating up into a surplus, or at least in the maintenance level, just so they feel good. And so their level of adherence and consistency with a calorie deficit intake, it really just drops. They end up not sticking to their diet more often than they actually stick to it, just because that huge calorie deficit is just so unsustainable. The side effects of low energy, feeling miserable, feeling hungry, having poor training sessions, those side effects just begin to become too much, and people just end up naturally just eating more and taking themselves out of that calorie deficit, which is why their nutrition phases, their fat loss nutrition phases, just don't go so well. They get a bad reputation in their own head. It's not a good experience, and so they just don't want to do it anymore. They just start eating more, and it turns out just very unsuccessful. So the way that you can eliminate these three side effects, and the way that you can have a healthier, more energetic, a stronger, and much more successful and sustainable fat loss phase, is you eliminate that large deficit. You remain in a deficit, but you eliminate the large size of that deficit. So you don't take a 1,000 calorie deficit. Maybe you don't even take a 500 calorie deficit. Like I talked about yesterday, I personally start very conservative with my own calorie approaches and clients' calorie approaches as well. And so I'm always looking to make my calorie deficits very conservative in the beginning. And this might just be consisting of a 100 to 200 calories per day deficit. And that's something that I really recommend to you as well, just because it's a smarter approach in general. It's going to give you a more successful fat loss approach overall. And every single time you make those adjustments when you plateau, make them conservative as well, because you should never have to take a severe approach and make a very extreme calorie drop. It's just not part of the process that has to happen. And so just like yesterday's YQMA's tip was, if you want to gain weight at properly, what you need to do is you need to eat as little as possible while gaining weight at an ideal rate. Today's number one rule is that when cutting fat, what you want to do is you want to keep in mind that you should eat as much as possible while losing weight at an ideal rate. Now, just before closing, I'd just like to say that the ideal rate in general for weight loss for females is usually around a ½ pound to 1 pound per week, and to males, it's closer to that 1 pound to 1.5 pounds per week. Clearly, this is going to depend a little bit on the individual and how much weight they do have to lose. And I should note that whether you're a female or a male, as you get leaner and leaner and leaner, that rate of loss per week is obviously going to shrink because you're not going to have as much fat to lose, and it's not going to come off as easy. So this is a very important topic, and if you find that in your fat loss phases you've really been feeling miserable and low energy and weak and just not being able to stick to the plan, you're probably in too large of a deficit. So use the information in this video to really help yourself out and do things right. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to email me, ryan@growthstimulustraining.com. You can find me at Facebook as Ryan Smith Miller. You know that's my full name. And other than that, it's Tuesday afternoon, and I want you to train hard tonight, eat well, eat with reason for the rest of the day. And I thank you for watching. As always, I appreciate the views.